Oxygen systems. The safety precautions to be taken whenever using oxygen are: refrain from smoking, avoid sparks, avoid greasy matter which can catch fire spontaneously, operate the oxygen system valves slowly. Oxygen systems are systems used on pressurized aeroplanes in two cases of emergency: rapid depressurization or smoke or toxic gases. Chemical oxygen generators. The advantages are they're inexpensive, lightweight, they require little maintenance, easy storage, no risk of explosion. The disadvantages: the flow rate is not adjustable, has a non-reversible function, in other words, when it's on, and has poor autonomy. In comparison, gaseous oxygen generators. The advantages and disadvantages are reversed. Chemical oxygen generators supply oxygen for about 15 minutes. Modern pressurized transport aeroplanes are equipped with two independent oxygen systems, one supplying the flight deck, the other the cabin. The flight deck has gaseous, an on-demand system on inhalation, different modes of operation: normal, which is diluted demand, 100% oxygen, and emergency at a higher flow rate. In the cabin, there is chemical oxygen systems, which are constant flow. They mix cabin air and oxygen and only have a 15-minute supply. In a rapid decompression, masks drop automatically to passengers and crew. The opening of the doors giving access to the oxygen mask for the passengers is pneumatic for the gaseous oxygen system and electrical for the chemical oxygen system. First aid oxygen is provided to give flight crew respiratory assistance after depressurization, as well as giving medical assistance to passengers with pathological disorders. Survival oxygen is supplied to the aircraft occupants in case of accidental depressurization. With regard to the passenger briefing in public transport aircraft, the information about oxygen must be given to passengers through a demonstration. If a flight is to be carried out at flight level 290, this demonstration must be completed before takeoff. The replenishment of an onboard oxygen bottle must be done with engines off. Oxygen systems. Minimum requirements for supplemental oxygen for pressurized aeroplanes. This table shows the supply for occupants of the aeroplane for various durations and cabin pressure altitudes. When the supply is for all occupants of flight deck seats on flight deck duty, the duration and cabin pressure altitude are the entire flight time when the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 13,000 feet and the entire flight time when the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 10,000 but does not exceed 13,000 feet after the first 30 minutes at those altitudes, but in no case less than 30 minutes for aeroplanes certificated to fly all altitudes not exceeding 25,000 feet, or 2 hours for aeroplanes certificated to fly altitudes more than 25,000 feet. The supply is for all required cabin crew members. The entire flight time when cabin pressure altitude exceeds 13,000 feet, but not less than 30 minutes, and entire flight time when cabin pressure altitude is greater than 10,000 feet, but does not exceed 13,000 feet after the first 30 minutes at these altitudes. The supply is for 100% of the passengers, entire flight time when the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 15,000 feet, but in no case less than 10 minutes. For 30% of passengers, entire flight time when the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 14,000 feet, but does not exceed 15,000 feet. 10% of the passengers, entire flight time when the cabin pressure altitude exceeds 10,000 feet, but does not exceed 14,000 feet after the first 30 minutes at these altitudes. Oxygen systems. Minimum requirements for supplemental oxygen for non-pressurized aeroplanes. The supplies for all occupants of flight deck seats on flight deck duty, entire flight time at pressure altitudes above 10,000 feet. All required cabin crew members, entire flight time at pressure altitudes above 13,000 feet and for any period exceeding 30 minutes at pressure altitudes above 10,000 feet, but not exceeding 13,000 feet. 100% of the passengers, entire flight time at pressure altitudes above 13,000 feet. 10% of the passengers, entire flight time after 30 minutes at pressure altitudes greater than 10,000 feet, but not exceeding 13,000 feet.